Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second ever episode of Internally Screening with myself, Rupert,
And me, Adam.
and Adam. We're going to be talking about films again because that's all there really is to do at the moment. And before we start talking about some good films and some shit films, as we did last time, I just wanted to talk about one little thing. So, once again, everything's been pushed back. So this is going to lead to something more interesting and somewhat entertaining, I promise. But basically, everything's been pushed back once again. So everything that was going to come out in September are going to move back to August, much to the dismay of Disney, I'm sure, who want to put Mulan out as soon as possible, having spent, I'm sure, millions and millions of dollars on promotion for the film. And also to everyone's favourite Christopher Nolan, who wants to release Tenet as soon as possible and is completely against the idea of putting it out on digital. Because, to be fair, I don't think Tenet is all too similar in its demographic to something like Trolls World Tour. That was an interesting talking point. And what came out, another thing that came out related to Christopher Nolan, somewhat related to this, and his general kind of persona is somewhat strict and pedantic as a director, and obsessed with detail, was this other controversy about him not letting people sit on chairs. So this whole thing came out about how Christopher Nolan doesn't want you to sit on chairs on a set. So it says, Christopher Nolan doesn't allow chairs on set, says Anne Hathaway. She said, his reasoning is, if you have chairs, people will sit, and if they're sitting, they're not working. Which obviously, if you look at the replies here, yeah, no, pregnant people, hidden disabilities, older people are perfectly capable and need rest. You know, oh, this is unfair, etc., etc. And generally just doesn't look good for him. But what I found funny was this reply tweet where I believe this person was a VFX grip on The Dark Knight Rises, and he says, I've worked with Christopher Nolan, and he expands on this, and he says he does allow chairs on set. He just doesn't allow them for the cast, and he says they're elitist and saddles the prop department with they're elitist and saddles the prop department with subservience to on-set comfort for producers and cast, and they create a VIP lounge area that is 9 times out of 10 in the way of work, and he does allow chairs for everyone else. I just thought that was kind of funny.
I mean, it's certainly, like you say, it hammers home the his picky style, his very particular way of making films, I guess. I think that's kind of hilarious. The whole, like, if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean type of attitude.
Yeah, I do love the idea that he kind of runs his films like a really mean manager at like a corner shop, because like I think that really, like, I've worked in like a corner shop, and the idea of him being like that is really funny in my mind. Yeah. It would be less funny if the story was true and he was making everybody stand up all the time, and he was some kind of arsehole Stanley Kubrick style director, which I mean, given the kind of films he makes, is like very possible. And he certainly hasn't done much to distance himself from this persona of being like a really meticulous bastard. But I just thought that was quite funny, and kind of amusing that he's making the actors stand up, but everybody else gets to sit down. Because I can imagine when you've got that many egos on set. I think he's probably right.
I mean, actors get enough privileged time, to have to stand up a little bit each day.
Yeah,
sure,
they're getting paid like 100 times more than everybody else on set, apart from maybe Christopher Nolan. I think that's maybe the big flaw to his argument. We know he's sitting down on his director chair that says director in big letters.
Yeah, we need the pictures. We need the proof that he isn't sitting down. If he's sitting down, he's a massive fucking hypocrite. If he stands up, we need photographic evidence of said standing.
Release the receipts, Nolan. We want to see them. We need to see them. Okay, so we're going to talk about a film. What film are we going to talk about?
Okay, so the first film we're going to talk about is Capone, the new Josh Trank directed film featuring Tom Hardy. We thought it was it's interesting that he's made the return to the big screen, or I guess small screen at this point, but a would-be return to the big screen after his sort of colossal disappointment with the Fantastic Four movie a few years back, and the whole fallout around that, reshoots, and him falling out with the the producers and all those sorts of things. So it's kind of interesting to return to him as a director and see what he's getting up to right now, and inadvertently has some interesting parallels with Casino and Scorsese's work, in it being a sort of gangster biopic looking at the life and times of a sort of famous figure in that early sort of 20th century history. It's very I'd say the film is more interesting than it is entirely good.
Yeah, I agree with that, because like in concept this seems like the exact kind of thing that I would be totally into, and I hadn't written off Josh Trank as a director or writer just because Phantom Force was awful, because I don't know if you remember, there was a whole bunch of stuff that came out. It was a Fox film, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that came out about him being drunk on set, and basically he has disowned the film. He gave the film a 4-star review. A 2-star review on Letterboxd, on his Letterboxd account. That's kind of funny. Yeah. But on paper, like, Capone seems really interesting to me, because for a start, I don't know anything about Al Capone, and I don't know if you have much knowledge on him, but he's like kind of a period of history that I'm really unfamiliar with, and
to me, he was always famous for only being got for tax evasion. He was they could only arrest him for his tax offences, and where he was committing all these horrible atrocities, and his downfall was at the hands of something so tedious, which I always found interesting. But I never felt the urge to dig deeper. I mean, at the outset, the film starts with a sort of title card of information telling you about where he was in his life at the time that the film begins, and how he was suffering from neurosyphilis, which meant that he was degrading physically and mentally at a ridiculously accelerated rate. So he looked, in his late 70s, but he was only 48 at the time, which.
Yeah, the makeup, I had to keep reminding myself that he wasn't actually like a 70-year-old. He was actually, like looking up at his actual date of death.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, to go off on that point just briefly, I actually didn't think the makeup on it was particularly convincing for me. I just kept seeing Tom Hardy's face with a thin, sort of crackly veneer. But
it did seem to like kind of bury his performance a bit, but it was also I meant more in the sense
I understand. They were
obviously he's kind of, because it was weird to think that it was something that wasn't particularly addressed in the film, that he is actually quite young, but that whole film he's basically senile.
He plays it as though he's an 80-year-old man, but that by all accounts would have been how he lived his later years, given the degradation. But I remember seeing the trailer for this on like an IMDb kind of roundup of like interesting films to keep an eye out for in the coming weeks. And Capone was on there, and I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. And then I saw who was involved with it. It had this Scorsese vibe. I was like, damn, that sounds super interesting. I'm really looking forward to that. Then I checked IMDb's own page for it, and it was like a 4.9 out of 10 at the time or something, and it's still very low. And I was like, Jesus Christ. I love the idea that they were like proudly touting like, oh yeah, this film's really interesting, you should go watch it, and on their own page it was like totally slammed. I just found that kind of amusing.
That is very funny. Yeah, because so like the idea of this film is really interesting to me, because it's like it kind of speaks directly to something I'm really scared of, which is death. And it's about a film about a guy who is literally in his final stage of life, in the throes of death. He's like suffering from as he said, like neurosyphilis, and he's got some kind of dementia that comes with that. He's like losing all autonomy of his own body, just because it's degrading so quickly, and he's dying this horrible kind of disorienting death where he can barely tell his memories apart from real life, and he's kind of just completely losing it, which would, I mean, not only is it like a very kind of filmic idea to have, because there's so much stuff you can do with that, experiment, in terms of like experimenting and for actors to perform it. It's a very kind of juicy role for Tom Hardy to get his teeth into. But ultimately, I kind of felt like the film was unsure of itself and it didn't know what it wanted to be. Like, there are points where there's so many elements at play that just don't really mesh. So it's like partly a family drama about how his relationships with his wife and his children, and it's partially a mystery with this money that he's potentially hidden or hasn't hidden, and then it's partially like a very inwards looking about Capone looking back on his life and the
none of them
he's
really
done. But it doesn't really go in any of the directions in a very meaningful way or make any statement on it. It's kind of, and then it's also partly like a goofball comedy at points,
in
or
a
at least
weird
that's
way,
what I don't know if it's trying. That's the other thing that like tonally I didn't know when this film was trying to be serious and when it was trying to be funny a lot of the times, and I can only assume some of it was intentional, but there are points where I just didn't know what I was supposed to be feeling, and not in like a good David Lynch way, like in like a genuinely confused way.
What I would say, sort of as a precursor to my criticism of it, is you bringing up David Lynch is quite an interesting way of putting it. Like, the film has a very dreamlike quality to it, where because it plays so much upon his memories and whether or not he's actually imagining these things, or rather if he's actually living these things, or if they're just memories, or where the line where truth meets his imagination is very blurred. So you can kind of, and I have seen criticism of this, sort of writing a lot of the flaws of the film off as being part and parcel of the conceit of the whole film, of like, well, that plays into the dreamlike nature of it, and it gives it this David Lynchian sort of narrative where you don't know what to believe, everything's very mysterious and mystical and vague and intriguing. But I think
my problem with that is, how are you supposed to criticize anything if that's the approach you take?
There's that. But I think not so much in what the film aims for, but what the film how the film actually succeeds or fails at achieving these sort of lofty goals. And just to get right down to it, I think this film is bad. Like, I think this film does a bad job at executing all of those things. Like you were saying, it kind of feels like lots of different genres piled on top of one another, and with each genre is kind of its own little storyline, and very few of those storylines really feel like they come to fruition in any meaningful way. The mystery of the money, the family drama, the looking back on his own past, they all feel sort of, it feels like they've dipped their feet into those storylines without really committing to them. By the end of the film, it's all still as vague as it was at the very beginning of the film. Very little is answered. It makes for a very unsatisfying finale. Once you get to the end. But for me, the most distracting part of the film from the onset was Tom Hardy's performance, which I have to say was massively overcooked. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I completely agree with that. I mean, like, it's going to be what sells the film to people. He is kind of the money behind the film. I don't think many people are going to go into this film thinking, Josh Trank film, except for like nerds like us. And it's so like vaudevillian. The makeup makes it. It's both his performance is kind of buried by it, so he has to overact a little bit. And I think from some of his previous roles, like Venom, The Revenant, all this kind of stuff, and Bane, all of this, I think we got the sense that Tom Hardy is maybe a little bit John Travolta-y and that he definitely likes to ham it up a little bit. He likes to kind of get a little silly with it, and which is fine. And I think even though his performance I think is very bad, I think it's going to contribute to this film being, I think this is like a cult classic film in the waiting. It's so weird. But like, yeah, I like oftentimes I didn't know if he was trying to be funny or serious, or he couldn't convey that much in terms of emotion.
Yeah,
it's mostly just him like shitting himself,
I felt
and
like
pissing
there
himself.
was,
And when he is animated, it's like I couldn't tell if it was Tom Hardy or Andy Serkis doing like a mocap version of Tom Hardy, because it was just so off. It wasn't convincing. He mostly just like garbles his lines. He's basically unintelligible the entire film.
yeah, for sure.
Which is intentional, I guess, but his acting, I don't know, it wasn't good to me. It was like entertaining though.
I would say, sort of on that point of him sort of constantly speaking in garbled ways, he seemed to commit to the notion of him being like, I guess, you know, his deteriorating mental state, meaning that he constantly just kind of grunts and says yeah, no.
Oh, he's committed for sure.
It's like I found his like little grunts all the way through the film so distracting. Any moment of like dramatic weight was always undercut by him going and I had the subtitles on because he was so unintelligible, and every time it would say that was just...
You cannot watch this film. I would say if anybody's going to watch this film, you have to watch it with subtitles.
But
you
then
it
adds an extra level of humour every time he does say, like, he does grunt, because then they try and subtitle it in for you as though he's trying to say something. But regardless, it's kind of it is kind of emblematic of the way he plays the role, in that it's so it feels far too dedicated to portraying him as like I don't want to say like as deranged, if you want to put it that way, as possible. You know, trying to make it seem as gritty and as real as possible, because he would have been probably unintelligible, or people in that state can be very difficult to, you know, understand. But the problem is, when you go that far down the rabbit hole, it means that the film suffers because your character no longer becomes understandable, especially when you're the main character. Like, we see the film through his eyes and through his understanding of what's happening to him. And when he's constantly mumbling and garbling everything, it makes it very hard to like penetrate in further into the film. One, either to relate to his character on a more deep level, or just even understand like the narrative that's going on. Like, what does he like? And again, you could criticize that that angle of critique and say, yeah, but that plays into the Lynchian dreamlike quality of it. But to me, it just felt so pantomime, you know, so over the top. It kind of distracted me the whole time I was watching it.
I feel like Tom Hardy and Josh Trank, maybe they were on different pages, because the way the film is shot and edited and scored kind of feels very, for the most part, mostly very somber, serious. Lots of influences from some major nods to like Kubrick, and it's funny, we've been talking about David Lynch. It was actually shot by the cinematographer who shot Mulholland Drive. So. Clearly, which honestly, I mean, the film isn't particularly good looking. I would honestly expect maybe a little bit more from that.
Yeah, it was a bit strange pretty looking in the flat looking film. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't brilliant.
It had some like interesting moments, but like I feel like Tom Hardy just must have been on a different page, because what he's doing seems, I mean, he seems out of place amongst the cast. And again, I don't know if this is supposed to be on purpose, but ultimately, like as a film to watch, it's just more distracting than anything else.
Right, and that's just looking at like the lead performance. Like, when you've got that distracting of a performance as your as center stage, then it leaves the rest of your film on pretty shaky ground. You know, as to where to go from there. Like, you would need pretty strong writing and direction from there to kind of salvage that. And, you know, perhaps with some better writing and, you know, a more conclusive vision of where the film was going, you could have kind of salvaged that, and maybe his performance could have made more sense in a slightly different context. But I feel the writing kind of fails on to a similar extent as the acting does, although for kind of different reasons for me. I find the writing to be a little too kind of amateurish and vague. I find a lot of the dialogue to be really, really on the nose. For instance, there was this one scene I was actually kind of enjoying it, where his wife starts to fully appreciate the extent to which he is, you know, succumbing to dementia and things like that. And they're kind of, it's very closely filmed, like close-ups of their face. You know, he's in bed, she's nursing him, and he's saying like really sweet stuff to her, as though he's never met her. You know, he's like, "You're an angel, and you got broken wings, and I wanna help you." And it's like cheesy in that way, but it's cheesy in a kind of, he's deliberately saying like one-liners and things like that to try and like win her heart, as though he's not married to her at all. And I thought that was really powerful. But then immediately after that, he says, "But I don't know who the fuck you are, and you can't tell me what to fucking do." And I was just like, way to undercut your scene by telling everyone exactly what the character was thinking, when I was perfectly capable of understanding that. And it was way more emotionally affecting when he was being more innocent and sweet and trying to like win her affection without really realizing who she was. Like, I thought that was powerful, and it undercut itself. And I think
there were certainly some like out of film school vibes. I don't like using that as a criticism necessarily, but like it definitely feels like first drafty in terms of the writing. Like
definitely.
Like for example, I guess we're sort of in spoilers now. So if you care about spoilers,
I guess
this is the point
there
to
we
turn
go.
off. Yeah. So halfway through the film, there's like a point where he starts hallucinating. And there's like a long hallucination stretch, which I think is probably going to be the bit people talk about the most, where he kind of...
It was probably my favourite part of the film, to be fair.
Well, I liked it. It was probably the most entertaining part of the film, but I'm not sure. There are several hallucination parts, but basically there's like a point where... So yeah, he kind of hallucinates back. It becomes very shining-y. His dead son walks past the door with a balloon, which is like so horribly on the nose in terms of like a Shining reference, and you've got that like steady cam corridor shot.
Yeah, and then
of him walking,
and he goes down into like this basement that doesn't exist in his house, and then that opens up into a ballroom, and like it could not look more like or be more reminiscent of the ballroom scene in The Shining. Like, yeah, it's
it really is.
It's so note for note.
Yeah, it felt quite, and then, but there's like and then he sees, he goes from this ballroom to a sort of back room where you see someone violently getting stabbed, which, I mean, I almost get the sense this was like rewritten into the film to add for there to be something to do, because it really, whilst it was like, you know, a pretty brutal scene of someone getting stabbed repeatedly, it didn't really feel like it meant anything. Like, it kind of just happens, and then he reacts. The point of the scene is Tom Hardy, in his dementia state, remembers something, but he doesn't even recognise himself in the memory, because when you see him reacting to this man getting stabbed, he feels a bit kind of out of his water, even though this is something that he has literally taken part in. So I get the point of that, but this happens, and then when he wakes up, there's no like character arc, really. It's not even like he becomes... This was my other big problem with the performance, because it's completely central to the film. There's no real arc for Tom Hardy. A lot of things happen in the film, but he starts off, you know, running around a bit, you know, and he's like a little bit more mobile, and then for the rest of the film, he pretty much immediately, like within the first 20 minutes, is almost like vegetative.
Yes.
Like, cannot remember what he's
I-
doing, and then for the entire film he's just shitting
Yeah.
himself and like falling
Which I would
over.
like to point out.
Like it's just there's
I
no
would
arc.
like to point out that the film, like the whole him hitting a vegetative state, like the point that comes in is very specifically a weird horror scene where he sees, I don't know if it's an image of his dead son or the son he abandoned, because there's actually is that. Oh yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into that
did I
anyway.
get that wrong?
But the point is, he sees the image of his son, and that he's like got stab wounds in his chest, and then the horror sting at the end of the scene where his wife wakes up and it's like, oh my god, is that he shat the bed. I loved that. I found that hilarious. Like the whole horror sort of punchline of it, like the horrifying climax of the scene was that he pooped himself. Like it was so. It was so strangely comedic. And then from that point on, as if shitting yourself is the it's the ultimate sign that your life is is drawing to its final moments.
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying is basically that this film like has so much potential to work because it's like the idea of making a film about someone in literally the point at which they're between life and death and they don't know what's going on and it's horribly disorienting. It's like a really like juicy, arty, like it's the perfect idea for a film. Like you could do so much with it, but when your character, I don't know how they could have solved this. Like I understand that they wanted to make it his final year of life, so it probably is accurate in the sense that he probably was like this in his final year of life. But at the same time, I can't feel much emotions when the only time I see him being, at his, at least close to normal state, is right at the beginning of the film, and in like a few flashbacks, like the point at which like he finally loses it and dies is just way less impactful because he's like on the verge of death the entire film. And I mean, I guess you could make some kind of.
It would have been far more interesting. I mean, I guess it's it's dependent upon what sort of film you wanted to make, and they clearly wanted to make this kind of dreamy type film. But if they'd have gone more full Scorsese with it and done like a Goodfellas type thing where you see like a whole arc from like this point of his life to this point of his life, that could have been more rewarding in terms of feeling a stronger emotional connection to him when he is more lucid, and then feeling really depressed and sad for him when he is no longer in control of his mental or bodily functions. Or you could just play it less ridiculous for half the film, unlike what Tom Hardy did. So you had like a strong chunk of the film where he was just a little bit more lucid, and so you could have that extra time where he also there's some like awareness of himself, like because the thing is, I have no real idea watching this film if this follows real life particularly strongly, and I guess it's not the business of the film to be 100% accurate. So I don't know if he wasn't that lucid in real life, then just change it a bit, just so that it feels more, it's more gripping as a film. Because if they're trying to play it like it was in real life, and that's speculation on my part, but if that's how they're doing it, then they sacrificed a lot of like emotional connection for that.
I understand why they did focus on that 1 year, because like the purpose of the film is to sort of put you in his shoes and make you see things the way he might have seen them in his final year. But the problem is, for a start, there are several scenes without him, so it sets up several subplots with characters outside. So, for example, the detectives looking for the money, and his film. Played by, I forget his name, Jack something, forget his name, the guy from Rumblefish and the house that Jack built. It's not his, I can't remember his name. That
Matt
other guy
Dillon.
Who essentially turns up for like Matt Dillon. That's it. So Matt Dillon shows up, doesn't really do anything. The money people show up and are in it for a bit. The film cuts away to these characters. So it completely undermines the idea that this film is supposed to be this fully subjective, looking through his eyes thing. Yeah, and then it also but if you're going to cut away anyways, why not give us an idea of what Capone was like? Because I watched this film and I don't fully understand what he was like, because you're kind of supposed to infer from people's interactions with him what he was like, and the film doesn't want to explicitly show you that. So the only times you see what he was like was in his hallucinations, which, as I said, he doesn't even remember them properly, is what the film implies. And from other characters. And to be fair, I mean, I think outside of Tom Hardy, I think most of the acting is pretty decent. So Carl McLachlan's in it. He's good. I forget the name of the actress that plays his wife, but she actually, I thought, was very good in some scenes. She was probably the most consistently good actor in the film.
Yeah, she was good. Linda Cardellini.
That's the one. Yeah, she was she was really good. But again, she seems totally out of tandem with Tom Hardy, because she's underplaying it and doing like a quite good performance.
Which also felt weird. I guess, again, if you like the film, it adds into the dreamy element where she is like an anchor to reality. So the fact that she is playing it so straight kind of makes it feel like, you know, she is, I guess, not only a voice of reason, but a point of normality for it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, and I mean, most of the... I don't want to be mean, but I can't help but think maybe Josh Trank... I think he's very talented. I think Chronicle, which I think it was his first proper film, is like a really well-directed, really well-made... It's like a found-footage superhero film, and it's really, really well done. But I can't help but feel maybe this is like a little bit outside of his... his current skill set, because...
Yeah.
Everything about this film just doesn't quite work. It's mostly just mimicking Kubrick, and maybe a little dabble here with like some David Lynch sort of, abstraction here and there. But for the most part, and then obviously Scorsese, it's a gangster film and it's about someone's downfall, so obviously it's going to play a part. But I just can't help but feel it's kind of like Josh Trank doing like a cover set,
absolutely,
of some of his favourite films, and I don't know if it works.
It definitely feels quite impressionistic of the directors you mentioned, like a student mimicking his favourite artists rather than actively creating their own vision with their own talents and their own voice. It's interesting you say that it could be a cult film in years to come, because I hadn't thought of that, but you're right, it is ripe for that kind of reevaluation, if only for its kind of Kubrick and Lynchisms, because works by those two directors were similarly reevaluated.
I think the great appeal of this for like a cult film audience is like, it's really hard to decipher what the film is going for at any one given bit, and like, there are parts of the film that are kind of like, while I don't think this is a good film, I was not bored with this film, so I don't out and out hate it.
It feels like a film that was
there is some ridiculous shit that happens.
It feels like a film that had like genuine passion behind it. For all that we've been kind of slamming it, like. Josh Trank clearly really wanted to do this story in a certain way. There was like a passion and a vision. It's just that his ability to execute that kind of fell short in a myriad of different ways. It would have been far more successful if he'd have picked one storyline to work with, or at least one subplot instead of 3 or 4 little plots. Because...
They don't go anywhere.
They don't go anywhere, and they're very unsatisfying. Like the FBI plot, for example, comes. I mean, it's introduced right at the beginning, but we only are introduced properly to our FBI investigator in the last quarter of the movie or something, and we're introduced to him, and no sooner is he introduced does he fucking disappear. Again, maybe he didn't exist. Maybe it's all. This was kind of been bugging me this whole time, trying to criticize this film. Like I said at the beginning, everything I think of can be undone with, oh yeah, but it's supposed to be like that. It's like dreamy, and I just can't. It can be quite hard to like work your way out of that little hole. But yeah, I don't know. also the bit where, for instance, a spoiler, Matt Dillon's character is revealed to be a vision and not really there, because it turns out he's the guy that's been stabbed to death. Which, by the way, that whole stabbing to death scene totally mirrors the Pesci stabbing the guy in the neck in Casino.
Yeah, it did remind me of that. Yeah, the kind of voice.
Yeah, it was as though
well,
Trank got a certain way into his film and was like, oh shit, I need a Scorsese bit, I need a violent bit, and then he chucked that bit in. He was like,
I think they added that bit. I think they must have added that bit to get the kind of I don't know what this is rated. I assume it's rated R, but that kind of felt like, oh, we need a bit for people to talk about. Let's put a bit that's, because that bit is just so
really
out of place with the rest of the film. It's like so violent, and I was like, oh wow, it looks good, good effects. The scene's like quite tense, it's well done, but it just comes out of nowhere.
Does. But yeah, the reveal that it's really anticlimactic reveal that Matt Dillon is dead, and that when he's talking to him outside, and then his wife comes out with like drinks or something, and then it cuts to the chair and the chair's empty. It's like there was no build intention or musical sting or anything, even like a kind of
there was the kind of strange bit where he's talking to him with his eyes gouged
out.
Oh,
that was later on, yeah. And that bit's,
I guess that's
that
like
bit's also done. There are a couple, like I said earlier, with the way they turn him shit in the bed into a horror scene. Like that also felt kind of similarly like cliche horror, where it was like spooky thing happens and it's kind of like eerie, but it's a dream and it's not really consequential. It was quite cliche.
I mean, like the climax of the film, because there'd been so many hallucinations, the climax of the film is he goes on like a shooting rampage, and because I knew I was like, in my head I was thinking it's just going to be a hallucination, he hasn't actually killed anyone, because the film had already pulled this trick on me. I was thinking the entire time he was going around with his gold-plated Tommy gun, shooting people and going crazy. I knew it was going to be a hallucination. Lo and behold, it was a hallucination. And then there's like, I mean, I guess I didn't think it was bad, but I was just kind of weirded out by the weird tidal wave ending.
That was bizarre.
It didn't really make much impression on me. I just thought like my overall reaction to this film is basically just sort of,
there was a kind of cool
just nothing else.
Visual thing at the end of that hallucination, where he washes ashore and he's inside the painting he's been staring at all film, and to my memory the painting does change like several times throughout the film, like bits of it change, things like come in or come out or whatever. So I thought that was an interesting motif, but again, like with everything, not enough was done with it, and it felt kind of like a cool visual thing that didn't really have an awful lot tied to it beyond that. It was like more style over substance. Yeah,
I mean, as much as I didn't enjoy it, there was lots of good ideas in this film. I mean, I think ultimately I'll probably settle on like a 3 out of 10, as in it's worse than most films, but there's like, it's not completely irredeemable. There's something interesting here, and if this does become a cult film, I would happily go to like a silly screening with people laughing.
Right? Yeah. No, I'd go with that
stuff.
I think I'd agree with that as well. I think a 3 out of 10 is pretty fair. Like, because I think people might hear a 3 out of 10 and go, "What the? Why? That's far too harsh. You're lumping it in with the likes of fucking Transformers at that point." Do you know what I mean? But there's a big difference between a film,
because those are 1 and 2 out of 10 films.
Yeah, fair enough. But you know what? Like, there's a difference between a film that has a lot of vision, a lot of heart, a lot of creativity, but fails in pretty much every regard to really, execute all those things, or deliver on all those aspects.
Exactly. Everybody's got a good idea. This film might have some good ideas, but a good idea in and of itself isn't worth anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody has a good idea, but this film doesn't execute.
But I will say it's by far and away more interesting of a 3 out of 10 than many others. Like if I watched a blockbuster that was just really grey and drab, and I went, oh, it wasn't, there was nothing really going for it, 3 out of 10. Like I'd far and away watch this film again to try and pick apart more things. This is one of those. This is one of those
100%.
films I feel like I could potentially be convinced that it is better if someone who was really passionate about it kind of sat me down and was like, no,
maybe.
here's why it's great. Because
I would love to see some like proper deep analysis
for
on this
sure.
film from
Also,
somebody who
just
loves
one
it.
last
I would
note
love to
I
see
remembered on it. I remember there was this amazing fake alligator he shoots whilst he's on a boat with Matt Dillon. He just like fires into the water to shoot an alligator, and they cut to it for like a millisecond, and it literally looks like a cardboard cutout of a fucking alligator.
God, there's so much. This film, I mean, I feel like it's gotten into my head because I feel like Tom Hardy with dementia, and that I just can't. It's really hard for me to think back and put all of the pieces that this film presented to me in like a sensible order where I can criticize it. Because there's just ridiculous shit that happens like that, and him shitting himself in the middle of an interview, and the tidal wave and his shooting rampage and the bizarre ballroom bit and all of his dead son and him with a carrot in his mouth walking around.
That's good.
It's
I forgot about that.
It is.
That is actually quite funny.
Maybe this film is better than I think because when I think back on it, it is like a weird fever dream. So clearly, it's put me in the state of what Tom Hardy's trying to portray.
Maybe in that sense,
I feel like I'm going
maybe
crazy
in that sense
thinking
it has
about
achieved something there. But it does kind of just trail off and end. You know, like the ending is very underwhelming. Where he just meets up with his sort of long lost son. It's hard to know whether the son's real or not. But maybe it is, and maybe it's just him coming to peace with the world. But still, it again, like so many things, it felt like it's so vaguely touched upon throughout the whole film that when it's somewhat resolved at the end, I didn't really care, and it didn't really make me feel anything.
I still recommend it to anybody.
If anyone's like a sort of year completionist and they want to see like not just the good films of the year but all the interesting talked about films of the year, then yes, I absolutely recommend this film to movie nerds and things like that. But to your average movie goer, I'd probably give this one a miss. Right, so the next film we're going to discuss is Martin Scorsese's underrated 1995 cult classic, Casino. Kind of, I guess, caught in a strange time after Goodfellas, where, that film had such a ridiculous level of popularity and success. The legacy of that film has kind of since overshadowed the good quality of Casino, because I guess there are some similarities to the films. His Scorsese's kind of template and format, particularly across those two films, are very similar. So I can understand why that might be, this is a less discussed film than that. But having seen this for the first time recently, I feel like this needs to be lauded to a similar degree. This was an incredibly entertaining watch. Rupert, what do you make of this film? What's your take?
Yeah, so I mean, I think my favourite Scorsese, I mean, I'm kind of basic, I guess, because it will be Goodfellas, and I've seen quite a lot of his films, but Goodfellas is like, it's just, I've got so many good memories with it. It's like such a classic. It's got so many like brilliant moments. I think Casino is like a very, very like close second. It's so good because what I love about like the period piece Scorsese things, especially like Raging Bull, Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, and this, is they're all like really, really determined by the location of where it's set, and Casino makes like such a brilliant use of Vegas as a Las Vegas as a place, and like really like goes so in depth into like how fucked up and weird and like grim and beautiful and horrible it all is. Like in like such like it's both kind of a love letter in a way to Casino, because it to Las Vegas, because it does on one hand make Vegas look fucking awesome, and then on the other hand it's also like, well, yeah, it's awesome in the city, but then there's like 100 bodies buried in the desert. Yeah, like just a few miles away. And I love like how completely unfiltered it is for a film that's like, is it? I think this one is also like nearly 3 hours long, right? I don't think it quite reaches 3 hours, but it's a long boy, and it doesn't. it's just like that's what I love about Martin Scorsese. Is it's so like fucking tight, despite the fact it's nearly 3 hours long. It's just like great scene, great scene, great scene, great scene, end.
It's almost hard to keep up with it, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, it's not boring
he's
at
kind
all.
of introducing story elements and characters and things. Like I was honestly like, oh my god, okay, I'm just trying to process all this information, especially when you're trying to take notes at the same time, like trying to get everything, absorb everything in at once, and you're like, oh shit, okay, where are we now? Oh my god. And yeah, like you say, 3 hours blitzes past, honestly.
Like the first 40 minutes is almost all narration.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
and it doesn't even matter. Like normally for a film to have such a long stretch of mostly just narration with a few scenes cut in, I'd be like, this is maybe a bit too much, but it works because there is a lot of information it has to set up. It presents the information brilliantly. There's a lot of great tracking shots. Like I love the shot where they're showing the path of the money through the casino, and you see all the people taking bits of money, you know, as he's like as the money goes into the back room, and then there's the people counting it out, and there's a safe, and then he's taking it back to the offices, and you have that great shot where it sort of goes, it follows them around. It's really, really well done.
That's a perfect fucking shot. It's with such a vast film, it's kind of hard to like laser in, you know, focus in on, you know, what really makes it great and what moments are particularly stand out. But I guess if we go focus in on like the three main performances, I guess, you know, Robert De Niro just has this amazing gravitas to him in every.
This is like his most swag role. He's got so much fucking swag in this film. When he walks out in that pink suit, I'm like,
my
woo!
god, his outfits in
Good
this
Lord.
film. His outfits in this film are ridiculous, and I want every
good.
single one of them. I'm like,
all of the suits he's wearing is so fucking gangster.
Yeah, like, and he just has like this level of composure, and he's like slightly neurotic because he's aware of his position in the ranking, but he's also so like confident and secure in himself as well, like which is totally contrasted with Joe Pesci's character, who might be the most unhinged bloke in any film. Especially considering, you know, Pesci's put in the hours in like Goodfellas, to be as unhinged in that as possible. The fact he outdid himself is, you know, an impressive feat.
Well, like Robert De Niro in this, he's like a head teacher that I would be terrified of, because like you'll see him like have a go at a character in this film, like the incompetent guy who he has to hire to please the senator, where he's like, no, you're useless, I've given you a chance, you're out. He's like, so like he doesn't overact like much at all, really, even though it's like probably a bit more of a, it's a bit more energetic as a role than maybe, as we talked about Heat last time, it's a bit more exuberant than that. But he is, for the most part, you know, very cold behind the eyes in this, and like it's like reading his like small facial tics, which is like my favourite thing about Robert De Niro as an actor. And then, as you said, Joe Pesci. What I love about Joe Pesci in this film is I think he's maybe a little bit less unhinged than he is in Goodfellas, but he's way, way, way more scheming and nasty.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Whereas, like, I forget the name of Joe Pesci's character in Goodfellas. He's like a loose cannon,
right,
who's just like gonna do violent shit because he just gets emotional and he's like a massive egotist. In this, he's kind of the same, but he's behind your back and he's doing all this outrageous stuff, but he has this kind of like scheme of how to get away with things, and he's fucking everyone over. And then, yeah, I just love that. I think he's great in this.
And as we mentioned earlier, the an early scene, an early indicator of quite the the level of Pesci's. I'm gonna call him Pesci, even though the actors here are so iconic that they kind of outshine the characters in their own way. But yeah, Pesci's I guess just sheer violence and willingness to do whatever the fuck he wants. Where that guy badmouths De Niro at the bar, and then Pesci just turns around and stabs the dude repeatedly in the neck with a pen.
That's great. I love the bit as well.
That's a great
where,
tone setter.
I love the bit where Joe Pesci's associate is being rude in the casino, And then they chuck him out
Yes.
in a hilarious fashion using his head to open the door. And then he goes to Joe Pesci and whinges about it. And Joe Pesci calls him up. The guy calls him an F-bomb, if you will. And then Joe Pesci is reacting to this on the phone and starts hitting him in the face with the phone repeatedly as punishment. It's so good. He's
excellent.
he's so good at like for a guy with he's got like short stature, he is like one of the most intimidating.
He's so imposing.
Presences on screen.
He's like a bulldog or
so
something.
good.
He just would not fuck with it. Like he's
No,
yeah.
no.
And then to wrap it all up, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, you might be about to say this, so apologies for cutting in. I was going to say, despite these two great performances, my favourite performance in the film is Sharon Stone.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't know if I could say favourite, if only for the fact that she does such a good job of portraying this absolutely, I guess, totally on the edge, frantic woman. Like, I hate her character so much, but the performance is so spot on in making me hate her and making me, like, so... I'm just, like, fucking sweating every time she's in a scene. I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck is she doing? Like, it's so impressive. And, but in a strange way, she is quite sympathetic, because it's made very clear from the outset that the relationship she's in with De Niro is kind of a loveless one, that he's trying to win her affection through money and wealth, power, and, security, I guess. And she's still, she just, it never really clicks for her, and he's like, very untrusting, well, rightfully untrusting, but like, he's got this like iron grip over her. And at different points you find yourself sympathizing with either of the two of them. That's what's so clever about the way it's written, is you can kind of see it from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clever. Well, I mean, obviously you're supposed to side with De Niro's character eventually, but from the outset of the film, from the outset of their relationship in the film, she says to him, she's like, I don't love you, which is a great scene. They're sat in a restaurant, and he's like, I can. She basically says, "No, I don't love you, and I'm just being honest with you. Like I'm a free spirit." And he's like, "Well, maybe you'll learn to love me. So let's get married." So ultimately, and she says, "I am a wild spirit. Like I don't know if this is the right thing for me, but she goes along with it." So ultimately, everything that happens it does eventually come down to being De Niro's fault, because he knew what he was getting into, and she was completely honest with him. And like the opening scene where you're introduced to Ginger is her with a guy, and then he starts having a go at her for being annoying, and then she like throws the chips in the air and creates chaos.
That's great.
He knows, so he knew exactly what he was getting into, and then obviously she is a pretty irredeemable character for the most part. But you've got to have sympathy. I found her quite sympathetic. I mean, the first time I watched this film was ages ago, and I've watched it with my brothers a bunch of times. But ultimately, on this watch, I did find more sympathy for her, because she's completely upfront. She clearly, I think there's like very heavily implied that she's had very bad experiences with men, because she's like a prostitute in the 80s, right? Or is this film 50s? I forget. But no, sorry, it goes from 70s to 80s in this film.
Yes, it does.
But I think she's like she's not like just a kind of bland, mwahaha, evil woman character.
She's not
very
evil
three-dimensional.
No...
Okay, so I talked about how well how well paced the film is, but I also, one of the things the film does really cleverly, speaking of the 70s to 80s shift, obviously Martin Scorsese is really famous for using music in his films, and the way the film shifts from like lots of 70s needle drops to lots of like 80s needle drops, and the way the look of the film kind of changes is like, it's like really immersive to me.
Yes.
And I also love how the film shifts focus. So the first maybe hour and a half of the film is mostly focusing on the inner workings of the casino, the ins and outs of the way they're chopping it, chopping off a portion for the mob, and all this kind of stuff. It's got really engaging stuff about just the mechanics of the operation they're running, which is interesting to me. It's like it's almost like a like a documentary type thing where it's just someone explaining to you how this works, and it's really fun and interesting to watch. And you have this sort of this is how they run the casino, and this is Joe Pesci running his kind of gross undercover criminality type stuff on the other side. And then the film kind of shifts focus more towards Robert De Niro, his relationship with his wife and his kids, and Joe Pesci's family relationship, and how he's slowly estranging himself from the mob with the extreme nature of what he ends up doing. I guess we should probably put spoilers now.
Yes, I mean,
so
yeah.
Spoilers for Casino. If you haven't seen it, we're going to be spoiling it a lot.
Absolutely watch it. I mean, come back if you're if you've got 3 hours spare, dip out, come back. We'll still be here.
100%. Because then the other person I want to talk about in the cast was James Woods, who plays Sharon Stone's old pimp in the film. And he is so wonderfully slimy in this film. I've never seen a character more punchable. He's so good. I guess the main criticism of this film, though, is how similar it is to Goodfellas, which I'm guessing you probably noticed.
I suppose it's mostly in the framing of it, isn't it, really? It's the kind of, the rise and fall of a character or a set of characters in the criminal world, really. But I guess the main separation, like you say, is the setting and how and the setting colors everything so differently to Goodfellas. Like there's something so much more grimy and dirty about New York and Brooklyn and the way that, or like all the bits around there that Goodfellas is set in.
Yeah.
Versus Las Vegas is supposed to be this sort of shiny kind of plastic model town in the middle of the desert. There's this kind of Disneyland quality to a lot of the the buildings and the aesthetic of the place, and its grittiness doesn't come so much through a visual aspect as it does through like the seedy underbelly of like how false and unassuming it all is, I suppose. The idea that I guess it comes back to the title. The idea that a casino or casinos in general are the kind of anchor point for this entire city, that everything goes through it is controlled with the money, and all the money ends up in the casinos. Like that's like a really interesting aspect. I think I find that particularly interesting as a British bloke, because it's kind of
it's quite alien, isn't it?
Yeah, like for an American,
Culturally.
I'm sure like there's far more, I don't know, an established knowledge of the cities, and obviously I'm aware of Las Vegas and how kind of strange it is, like with all its its fake Eiffel Tower, its fake pyramids and all that. Like I'm familiar with it, but like this film took me in it really brought me into this world in like a very gripping way. Like and I think that sets it apart from a lot of films as well, because there are so many like gangster films, particularly set in New York. I'm very familiar with New York now. I could probably walk around it myself, without a map, and I've never been there. But where Las Vegas, Las Vegas holds more mystery, and this film kind of picks that apart.
It's kind of weird to me that there aren't more films set in Las Vegas watching this, because it seems like the perfect like setting for a film. It's so like garish and colourful, which makes it like a really visually good setting. And also there's so much like corruption going on, obviously. It's not even like pretending there isn't.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I love some of the stuff that sort of goes on in the casino. One of my favourite scenes is where De Niro's character Ace is he's working out how someone's cheating, and he sees like two guys sitting at different tables giving each other tells through it's through like Morse code, which is fucking sick. He's like giving him like signals and stuff, and like
that's a great scene.
It unpicks it all, shows you how they like how much security they have in there, and all all the people that are like secretly on the payola that are like working for the casino and also working for the people doing the scam, and then they take the guy out. They like fucking they cause a ruckus at one table, and then they go up to the dude with the fucking cattle prod, and it's just which is excellent. And then they bring the other. Do they bring that? They bring that guy back to the.
They like break his hand.
Yeah, they but first they get an angle grinder out. I was like, oh my god, are they going to cut his fingers off? Like, I was not ready for that kind of brutality. But then they only break his hands, which is very minor in comparison. But yeah, it's a thing Scorsese is excellent at, combining sort of violence, terror, and comedy into one sort of thing. If you know what I mean. Like, it's a very threatening scene. You're kind of horrified at the prospect of what might happen to these characters, but because they're not your lead characters, because they've done something they kind of deserve punishment for, you're kind of like, all right, let's see where this goes. And it's done in a kind of really offhanded, like, because the violence is so everyday to them, and that they're dishing this out constantly to people that cheat, as is implied by the scene. Like, there's this wonderful flippant nature to it, where he's just like, just chuck him out the back, tell him, who fucking cares? And then and then the scene ends. And you're like, okay, that was excellent. But then you see later on in the film, Pesci is just trying to do another one of his schemes, and he invites a bunch of his mates into the casino and do exactly the same shit, but with way worse tells, where they're like flicking their ear, like, and tapping their shoulder really obviously. It's great.
I mean, the violence in this film is definitely, I mean, obviously Goodfellas is very violent as well, but I think this might be like slightly more over the top in its violence. I mean, the two examples that stand out for me, my two favourite bits of violence in this film, obviously the Vice scene, which I mentioned when we were talking about Capone, is, I mean, yeah, it's so absurd. So like, Joe Pesci has this guy's head in a vice to try and get him to snitch.
Oh shit! Yes, sorry. And
he literally pops the guy's eye out, and then the guy finally confesses, and it is like, it's so gruesome. It's so gruesome.
I actually thought they were going to go the whole way. I thought the dude's head was just going to get crushed out, like fucking mint.
I mean, it's so much worse that it doesn't, because then his head is stuck in the vice, and then they don't like they don't let him go. They just like go, and then they stab him, and he's just left there in the vice.
Oh
shit!
Out. Yeah, they do. Fuck, I forgot
it's
that.
So brutal. But
I think I repressed
it. It's horrible, but like, obviously kind of funny in how absurd it is. It's kind of almost like the effect they use is
and the way Pesci narrates it, he's like, I popped your fucking eyeball out and you still won't give me him? And it's like, yeah, he's got a point. Like, dude, give in. Fucking just tell him.
Yeah, I know, I love it. No, but then he does give him, and he's like, you made me pop your eyeball out for that guy? And it's like, it's really funny. But like, the most brutal part, a bit of violence to me, is when Joe Pesci meets his end and he gets ambushed. Basically,
and they
him and
beat the fucking dude.
They hold him. They beat his brother to death with
like steel
with metal
baseball
bats. Yeah, and like, it is the sound editing in that scene is fucking amazing for a film from the 90s. There's none of these like silly like thwack Hollywood noises. Like, it sounds like they're getting their bones beaten.
Yeah, and it's like, and the horrible part is like, it gets a duller thud each time because the bones are already broken. And it's just, it gets to a point where it's just like hitting meat. Like, it is
like minced. Difficult to watch.
Yeah.
I also love that when that happens, before it happens, he's having an internal monologue in narration, and it gets cut short because he gets hit in the back of the head by a bat. And it's so like, and they bury him like while he's still breathing. They literally like chuck him and his brother in like a grave.
Oh, man.
He's like still breathing, and they're like ladling the dirt onto him, and it's like genuinely one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. I don't think Goodfellas Goodfellas obviously has a lot of really violent parts. I don't think anything reaches quite that level of sadism. I think this film is generally, in terms of its direction as well, is like a little bit flashier. Like, for example, I don't know if you remember, there's lots of, I mean, Scorsese does this in Goodfellas as well, but like, it stuck out to me more in this. Like, there's the shot of the camera. I think it's as they're getting married, maybe, or as he's receiving an award. I can't remember, but it has this shot of a camera light, like the old camera bulb, and it shows like the close up of the electricity going through the fuse, and then the flash. And it's like a really sudden, sort of like, I don't know what you'd call it, like an interjected shot, that like emphasizes the flash. There's like lots of like bits like that, or like
yeah.
I'm trying to think of another example. Maybe it was just that one. But the film just felt very. It's like done in the same style as Goodfellas, but it has its own personality. I think maybe a lot of it does just come from the setting, but
yeah. Well, I mean it's huge. In a very broad sense, you could almost call it kind of like a spiritual sequel in having so many actors, or rather two pivotal actors from one film in the next. But like the key change is more the environment. It is almost kind of showing different sides of the sort of same picture, if you like. I don't know, like, you know, what whilst this was happening in one part of America, this was happening in another part of America, and they mirror each other very similarly. So I mean, I guess I don't have that problem. Like, I wasn't watching this film thinking, damn, this is just this is fucking. I keep nearly saying The Godfather. This isn't like Goodfellas. Like, I'm not. It's structurally very similar, but beyond and directed. There's in being directed by Scorsese, it does have a lot of the same kind of hallmarks. But yeah, like you say, a flashier kind of aesthetic to match the setting. I don't have a problem with that.
Something else I picked up on, which kind of differentiates it from Goodfellas a fair bit. Obviously, this is also an element in Goodfellas, but so I never noticed this before. But there's kind of there's more commentary than I remember in this about Robert De Niro's character is Jewish.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of commentary on, like, I think his experience is like an immigrant, or at least like someone who doesn't feel like he belongs in the American lifestyle. As the film progresses, so he gets the casino, and he's kind of happy to run it as like a kind of con for the mob to make money off of, for quite a while. And then eventually he kind of wants to become more legitimate, and he's innovating the casino in new ways to become more and more successful. And the scene which really highlights it is the scene where he fires one of the kids that he only hired to please an American senator, the guy who's dressed as a cowboy. Then the guy, when they have the meeting together, the guy is kind of insinuating a lot of sort of anti-Semitic. He's insinuating a lot of anti-Semitic sentiment towards Robert De Niro. And then when Robert De Niro goes to court over his casino license, he's there, and I'm pretty sure there's also a scene, or he says something basically explicitly anti-Semitic. So like the theme of the film is like quite interesting.
He definitely chucks the K word in there for sure.
Yeah, I think he does.
He's in the room with some policemen. I think he says, let's go get this."
Yeah.
So,
obviously, I mean, Goodfellas is also about like Italian immigrants and their experience in America.
Yeah.
But this was like a more subtle one that, I mean, I don't know why I didn't pick up the first few times I watched this, but it was like quite interesting to see that, because this isn't the kind of, I don't know, I can't think of many other films that are about that.
Yeah, they don't do it in a more kind of caricaturish way, where, because often it would be in a film where it's more blasé. I guess you could make the argument that the subtlety in this does kind of make it more blasé as well. That it's something that maybe should have been more established, and perhaps that would have been an interesting thing to see more of. But yeah, it certainly touches upon it more than a lot of films like this, because there's often I don't want to say token Jewish character, but there are often minor Jewish characters in films of this ilk because of the blending of or the crossover between Italian and Jewish culture. But because Italian culture is often the focus, the Jewish characters are often kind of like an aside,
sidelined to like their jobs.
Any struggles they have, and any struggles they have are also kind of made light of and brushed aside. Also, very quickly, I do want to point out that the guy who plays the senator, the actor is called Dick Smothers, which is
really?
one of the most fantastic names.
I wonder if that's his real name.
No, it is. His name is.
His name is Richard, so he chooses to call himself.
He calls himself
Dick
Smothers. His name is Richard
That's
Smothers.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that is pretty cool.
I mean,
wow, that is amazing. He's quite a good side. There's a lot of great side characters in this. For like, I also love I love all of the older like Jewish bosses. The like really old
bosses,
guys.
Right?
I think some of them are Jewish.
Are they?
I think I could be wrong on that, but I think some of them are Jewish. The really old guys. With like the really gravelly voices.
I love that basically Joe Pesci will do something awful and then it will cut to them and they go, "Hey, can you go have a word with him?" I won't keep doing the accent. I'm fucking terrible at it. Have a word with him, please. He's fucking about. Please sort him out. I
love the. There's a lot of narration in this film. I also love the bit where they're like, they ask Joe Pesci's kind of like best friend assistant. They're like, how's he doing? How's he coping? And obviously everything's going horribly wrong. And because the government has started investigating at this stage, and then the film freezes, and then suddenly the character who's never had narration before pops in, and he's like, "Well, I didn't know what to tell them, because if I tell them this, then I'm fucked. But if I tell them this, then I'm also fucked." There's just like so many like neat bits like that.
No, I love that. Yeah, like, it is quite a meta film in that way. Like you mentioned, like with whole Pesci getting hit in the head and it's his narration cutting off. It's kind of a bit of a fourth wall break slightly because I guess unless it's all playing out in their heads, I suppose. But yeah, it has that kind of meta feel to it, doesn't it?
It feels maybe like a bit more personal than Goodfellas. Like maybe this will your mileage will vary with this, but like in Goodfellas, I mean, this is not a criticism of Goodfellas, but you feel very alienated from the main character, even though it's just him narrating. I think in that film, you feel very alienated from him because he's such an awful piece of shit. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, so are the characters in this film. But I do find myself, this is like maybe a little bit more, it has like maybe a little bit more compassion to it towards its characters, because you do kind of root for Robert De Niro. Although he's no doubt a bad person in this film.
Yeah, I think the core difference for me is that Robert De Niro is clearly trying to make himself more of a legitimate character, a legitimate businessman. He's found his way into the world of money in illegitimate ways, but now he's here, he's trying to like gain a foothold and maintain and grow his influence in more legitimate channels. Expanding the casino by adding like the bookie ring directly into it, shit like that. I love the bit where he doesn't get his license because the senator fucks him over, and so he just starts like a talk show in the middle of the casino chatting shit, which is fucking hilarious. But then
this is based on a real story, and that
that's amazing. I love that. And then it's contrasted so much with Joe Pesci either actively trying to sabotage him or inadvertently sabotaging him. And I think that's where our support for Robert De Niro really comes from, is that in Goodfellas, the character is kind of more his own worst enemy, in that he's like kind of, his incompetencies are either his own fault or kind of not really specifically targeted towards him, like that, whereas Pesci is like actively antagonistic towards Robert De Niro, particularly later on when he starts having an affair with Ginger, which is hilariously grotty, like one of the most hilariously dirty, uncomfortable scenes, where she's just sobbing to him, and then she just like with like doesn't miss a beat starts sucking him off. I was like, oh,
it is like
Christ.
the idea that a woman could be attracted to Joe Pesci is like genuinely a terrifying prospect. But it like totally makes sense that Ginger would, like, because she obviously like really gravitates towards like powerful men. And yeah, like I was saying earlier, like Joe Pesci's character being so slimy and schemy, like every time he does something, it's like, oh my god, how does he think he's going to get away with this? Like he's just constantly making bad decisions and just like sliming his way out of it. I also like, I think another crucial difference between this and Goodfellas is the main character's relationship with their wife. So in Goodfellas, like his wife is like kind of explicitly, and it's the point of the film, she is like explicitly kind of removed from the story. There's a subplot about him cheating on her, but you know, ultimately she has like no power in the situation, and that's the point. But as a result, she kind of features less. Whereas because this film kind of focuses more between the two of them, it has a greater focus on the relationship itself. There's like a very distinct kind of shift in terms of, like I was saying earlier, about how it changes from focusing on the mechanics of the casino to their relationship. Like there's a very different kind of trajectory of the film in that sense. And also I guess the other difference between the characters in Goodfellas and this would be that, yeah, like you were saying, I forget the guy's name from Goodfellas, but the main character in Goodfellas is quite incompetent, whereas Robert De Niro in this is like excessively hyper competent, and that's kind of his downfall.
Yeah, because he's let down.
And they get
by
like
people
quite a different
around him.
resolution as a result. Yeah, because this has kind of got a happy ending.
Kind of, yeah. I would like to talk more about like the relationship between the two, because I think that's again like another, another character that is amazingly antagonistic towards Robert De Niro, Sharon Stone, who, as we've discussed, is impressively unhinged in this, and some of the scenes where they're screaming at one another. Some of the most like visceral, intense scenes in
so stressful
in films like in my recent memory. Like it's so it's very strange to see such a composed and calm man really be broken down, because when he starts shouting back, that's when you know it's like fucking really far gone. I particularly enjoy the final one though, where he comes home and the kid is tied to the bed.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And then he comes back out, and the Sharon Stone returns. Actually, is it that scene? Is that the same scene?
No, that happens previously.
She's
tied to bed, and then there's the bit where she like drives in onto the lawn,
and then crashes
she's like knocking all the stuff
car.
over, and the police show up. And then she like tries to get it's all about her trying to get the money, and then eventually she gets it.
That's amazing. And
then she dies anyways. Yeah.
Does she die?
It's just she does. So like
she does. She goes on a mad.
She burns through all the money. Yeah, she burns through all the money, and then she gets.
She has a heart
gets
attack
given. She gets given. I forget what they called it. It's called like a hot shot or something. Basically, I remember looking it up actually. It's like it's heroin with battery acid, and if she's hanging out with a bunch of drug addicts. I guess if someone wants to fuck another one of them over, you give them this like corrupted shot of heroin, and she dies in the hallway. I love that shot as well of her in the hallway, all fucked up out of her mind, and then the camera's kind of like tracking across with the corridor, and then like falls down with her. It was.
I mean,
you do ultimately feel quite bad for her.
Yeah, and it kind of suggests that Robert De Niro was kind of right all along, that like, he was quite controlling and possessive, but the things he was doing or preventing her, the kind of life he was leading her away from would have killed her, and when he is no longer in the picture, the life she goes to does kill her, and that's not to say that Robert De Niro is perfect in the film, but that it's certainly kind of, it feels like kind of karmic retribution in a way. Like this is your reward for treating him like total dog shit.
Yeah, there is like a kind of sense of relief, definitely. But yeah, I love this film. I would give this film like a 9 out of 10 easily.
Yeah, I mean,
it's up there with my favourites.
Yeah, I can absolutely see why. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. It's one of those films that, like, well, kind of like I was saying, it felt kind of overwhelming in terms of just everything I processed all at once. Like, like I felt like I was being swamped with information at points, and so not all of it is as firmly rooted in my head as perhaps it would be with a more sparse film. But that doesn't mean that I didn't fucking enjoy every second of it. It's just it's probably something I need to return to really fully appreciate, like get it up to that level. But yeah, I mean, 8 out of 10 is nothing to sniff at. I'm not I'm pretty picky, so that's good for me.
Yeah, you can't really go wrong. I mean, Scorsese's done so many films and so many of them are great. I mean, you can really just kind of throw a dart at one of the films in his back catalogue and it will land on something that's gold because, you know, he's got kind of a track record like no other director, really. But yeah,
absolutely.
Well, that was an excellent recommendation, Adam. I thoroughly enjoyed watching Casino again. I think that might have been like maybe the third or fourth time I've watched it. It's kind of like a tradition with me and my brothers to sit down and watch like a really long Martin Scorsese film because they do just like kill 2 or 3 hours in like no time at all. Absolutely. But I'm gonna recommend a film, and I've been juggling like a few films in my head, but I think I'm gonna go with. I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
The Fincher one.
The David Fincher Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
I have not. No, I've been meaning to watch that for a long time.
Excellent. Okay, I'm recommending The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara by David Fincher, one of the best directors ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I love his stuff.
I've watched it so many times and I've read the book, so I'm really keen to like watch it again and see what you think of it. I will say the film's quite complicated. It might be worth watching it and then rewatching it, but that's up to you. It's very. Yeah, I'm keen to see what you think of that. It's a very, and I guess anybody who's going to watch it, definitely be ready for some really graphic stuff. It's not like it takes no mercy. It's a very brutal film, but a very good film, and I'm interested to talk to you about it.
Excellent. I mean, that sounds pretty spicy.
David Fincher, he's not known for making brilliantly happy films, is he? So
no, he's not. He's definitely got that. Miserable sort of sad goth boy aesthetic to him, I guess.
Definitely.
And have we got a new film that we're gonna work on, or will we kind of leave that a surprise for next time?
We'll leave that a surprise. We'll figure that out. Yeah, it could be Trolls World Tour once again. We might cover that at some point, or it could be something worth watching.
Trolls World Tour will just like remain this elusive film we never watch. Like every single time we're like, it could be Trolls World Tour.
It could be. I mean, it's kind of like you want to save yourself for the best. I might have to.
Absolutely.
I don't want to just go straight to dropping 10 out of 10s out of nowhere.
Well, that's the thing. It's like once you've watched the greatest film of all time, everything else is downhill from there. Like, how am I just gonna jump in with Trolls World Tour and then? Yeah. Life is so grey after that.
Yeah, no. Maybe I'll wait till Trolls 3 comes out, and then we can do a Trolls canon retrospective and analysis video. Breaking down the cultural and socio-economical impact of Trolls, the greatest franchise to ever exist.
Absolutely. I guess
thank you for listening, smashing like buttons, etc. We'll see you whenever we do the next one.
And we're on Instagram and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, subscribe, all the horrible stuff that every YouTuber has to do to, beg their audience to stick around. But yeah, this was fun. Hope you...
If you made it this far, you're a fucking trooper.
Yeah. Absolutely. I hope you all enjoyed it. And, come along next time. It'll be fun. We promise.